So I often say to people when I speak to them about this that they might think, oh, sorry, go back to the beginning. They might think I'm a witch.
You are.
Um, Thank you, Jane. And if I am, I assure you, I'm only a white witch. But it's partly because of the sort of folklore around the moon. But the extraordinary thing is that there is physics behind it that shows it does have an impact on our health, as do solar flares, and the changes of the seasons and the changes in the climate. And in fact, in the Chinese five elements medicine, they have a whole language for climate, to do with health. And so, of course, what we do know, is that uh, in the past, there have been stories like werewolves associated with full moons. But it's interesting because in prisons and in certainly, I don't know if now, but certainly earlier within the police, within hospitals, there was an understanding that people were more prone to accidents at full moon, that they could become aggressive in prisons or quite violent, also in psychiatric wards and hospitals. And so there's definitely an effect noted that is not just something that's, uh, you know, to be ignored. And in fact, I can remember going down to Brighton to do some lectures with the students there, and I was talking about all of this and more. And one of the students put her hand up and she said, "Now I understand why my nana used to say to me when I arrived on the doorstep to see her and my granddad, 'Oh, don't talk to your granddad today. The full moon's up.'" And she said he would be really withdrawn and grumpy, and it used to have an enormous effect on him. And it does seem to affect some people more than others. And one of the things that I often speak to people about, particularly in terms of the nutrition and naturopathy, is that these are very natural, earthly, and sort of celestial events that do affect us, that do uh, pull on the minerals in our body, just as the moon pulls the tides. The human body is water mixed with minerals, and it has an impact on us as well. And so there are all kinds of natural cycles that we live with in this environment. So we've got very simply day and night, and we know how different they feel to us. And the amount of light in a day can make an enormous difference to how we feel and impact even on people's winter moods, as we know. And also at night, then there is a natural fatigue. And, to do night shifts for years and years is not ideal for the body, because all of our routes of elimination, like gallbladder, liver, and the lungs and the large intestine, are working at their peak overnight within the Chinese five element system to create that cleanse that helps us feel well rested and recharged in the morning. So then you've got the seasons, and I just wanted to say hi to iPhone. I'm sorry, I can't see who it is that's joined us.
It's
Sue Crowther, I think.
Hi, yeah. Sue. Hi, Sue. It's lovely to see you. So the seasons also have an impact, and we'll know how different that lovely summer solstice feels that we've just been through compared to the winter solstice, although how glad we are with the winter solstice to be going back to more light, whereas with, of course, the summer solstice, we know that we're creeping back towards a bit more darkness each day. So the natural influences that they have are something that are so subtle that they're often ignored. And they're often ignored in terms of the kind of acute effects that they can have and the kind of chronic effects that they can have with illness, with the effects on the body. And so, again, as I mentioned, the idea is that we create a body or a bodily state internally that is able to flow with the cycles and able to respond to the natural events that are taking place. So if we take a quick look at the seasons to start with, mostly in the media, they describe, for example, the spring equinox as being the beginning of spring. But in fact, spring begins long before then. In the pagan calendar, as used to be, February the 1st was the beginning of spring. And in the wood element, which is the Chinese spring season, they believe it begins on February the 15th. And what you'll notice is that, of course, just around the end of January, beginning of February, all the snowdrops start to pop up. And they are like the little heralds of spring beginning. And the equinox, the spring equinox, is the midpoint of the season. So we move to summer on May the 1st. The Chinese fire season, it begins on May the 15th. And then unusually the Chinese have a sort of pivot point for the seasons, which lasts a week, July 31st to August 7th. And they call it the earth element. And they also say that there is a little bit of earth element in the beginning of and end of each of the seasons. And I don't know if you've ever, or if you noticed last week, how there was a change in the air. There starts to be a change in the air. I can't get over this week how many dead leaves there are on the ground.
Yeah.
And it's, the beginning in autumn for the pagan calendar, August the 1st, in the metal element for the Chinese season, August the 7th. And what's extraordinary, and I've just commented to Jean when we ate our lunch, is that I have a hot lips flowering sage in the garden. And during the summer season, and I've never noticed this before, and the change in it always has lots of red at the bottom of the petals and a lot more red throughout the whole flowering blossoms of the plant. But the extraordinary thing is this week, all the flowers that are coming out are just pure white. And red is the colour of the Chinese fire season, and white is the colour of their metal element. So the Chinese have a whole system built up where their observations of colour come in, their observation of flavour come into the changes of the seasons, and the kind of foods that are good to consume. And so in the metal element, they believe it's good to get some pungent foods in the diet. And pungent foods are sort of a bit spicy. For example, things like a bit of turmeric or a bit of cumin or coriander. They are things like onions and leeks and garlic. They've got that real pungent flavour. And then you've got your winter, which in the pagan calendar begins November 1st, and in the Chinese water season begins on November 7th, lasting through till February 15th in their calendar. And each of those turns of the seasons, you will find that an organ in the Chinese 5 elements comes into its peak. So the Chinese believe that in the spring, the liver is working to peak. In the summer, the heart. In late summer, it's the spleen, pancreas, stomach. And in autumn, it's the lungs and the large intestine. And in the winter, it's the kidneys and bladder. And so they suggest foods that will support each of those organs in that season and help to maintain health. Because if you can imagine, particularly for your kidneys and bladder in the winter season, there's a lot of work to do because it's colder, it's darker. When we lose that light, we lose a form of battery source of energy for the body. Because naturally, that photon light stimulates the electrons in the body and gives us that real boost that we get in the spring once the light starts to come in. And of course, then when we go into spring after the winter, our poor old bodies have got to slough off all of the wastes that have built up in that cold season. And that's often when we do get a natural spring cleanse in the body. And that organ, your organs, liver and gallbladder have got quite a lot of work on, like the kidneys and bladder have, to carry out that bodily clear out. So I'm going to have a look at sun and moon cycles because, of course, sun takes 365 days for us to go through a solar year, and the moon cycle is 29.5 days. So that changes a lot more rapidly, and every 2.5 days, roughly, it goes through a particular sign of the zodiac, whereas the sun takes 12 months to go through, or the Earth and its travel with the sun takes 12 months to go through each of those constellations that are in the sky above us. And this is what's really interesting about the moon cycle and what has been observed over the years. And if you are, I'll just mention it now, interested in the lunar cycles and their effects on health, there is a book called Moontime by Johanna Pornger, an Austrian lady, and Thomas Popper, who was the author that helped her write the book. And the Austrian observations of moon cycles are really quite fascinating. It's connected with biodynamic gardening, where you garden with the moon, and also, which she also discusses, and the effects of the moon on health, and various things like, for example, the best time to chop wood to get it right for winter storage for the fire. The best time, on the other hand, to chop wood to build housing with. So anyway, for the Earth to make one complete revolution takes 365.24 days, which is why we end up with a leap year every 4 years to catch us up. And that amount of time is the definition of 1 year. Now, the gravitational pull of the sun keeps the Earth and the other planets in orbit around the star, but the gravitational pull of the sun has a particularly strong effect on the moon, which is what contributes to the effects on our bodies of the full and new moon. So, like the moon, for example, and other planets, Earth's orbital path is an ellipse. So it's not a normal, natural, beautiful, perfect circle. It's more of an elongated circle. So the planet is sometimes farther away from the sun than at other times. So the closest that we get to the sun each year is 147 million kilometres on around January 3rd. and the furthest away was more recently on July 4th at 152 million kilometres. And that in itself has an impact. So why do we need light? Well, one of the most important reasons is because it helps us manufacture vitamin D. And if you think about vitamin D, it behaves like a hormone in the body and helps with absorption of calcium and other minerals. Really important for healthy maintenance of bones and teeth, but also helps liver and kidney function. And vitamin D is associated with so many more functions in the body. So it's naturally anti-cancer, it's supporting our immune system. I could go on at length, but they do know it's hugely beneficial for all sorts of conditions or preventative of them. And so Dr. Johanna Budwig, who again, I think she's either Austrian or German, was a researcher into fats at the end of the war. And at that time, at the end of the Second World War, there was a lot of very poor quality fats brought in during the war, cheap fats like margarine and all kinds of other manufactured processed fats, which in fact, replacing as they did some of the essential fatty acids, have been quite damaging over the long term for health because their usage has increased greatly. And so electrons in our food are serving, when we consume them, as a kind of resonance system for the sun's energy. And so their electromagnetic field attracts photons in sunlight, and those photons have their own vitality, they're in continual movement, and they're in resonance in particular with electrons in the seed oils, such as sunflower, flax, or linseeds, of course, as they're called, starflower, hemp seeds, sesame seeds, and so on. And they're focused on the same wavelength as the sun's energy and help us live healthy lives. And so Dr. Johanna Budwig wrote a little research book on flax oil, and she believes it's a true aid to health. Now, I think the tricky thing with flax oil is that whereas for women, it's much easier to break down. And the reason is because women have more estrogen, although of course we have much less as we go through the menopause. But estrogens are actually a helper for the breakdown of omega-3 fats in their full form. Whereas men, testosterone is a bit of a breakdown blocker for the essential fats for you to get them into a state in which you can utilize them in the body. So it's much easier for all of us, but particularly for men, to take fish oil or krill oil if they're going to take it as a supplement, or for us to eat oily fish rather than the seeds. Much, much more supportive of men's health. So the electrons on the seed oils, on the same wavelength as sunlight, are capable of drawing in that solar energy. And this might sound a bit difficult to picture, but it's a little bit of physics, because on storing it, they can activate it as pure energy of dematerialized electron clouds, now available for vital functions, when we consume it. And all of those vital functions are closely connected with cell membrane health, because every single cell in your body has a fatty membrane. And some of that will need to be essential fats, but some of it ideally needs to be essential fatty acids. And one of the reasons for that is that the essential fats have what you would call a kinky tail, in that saturated fats are very like little soldiers in the cell membrane. They're very straight and orderly, whereas the essential fats have a shaped molecule, and that allows things like neurotransmitters such as dopamine and serotonin that help you feel good dock into the cell membrane. And it also allows a larger pathway between the essential fats it's next to for nutrients to get into the cell and water and wastes to leave. So your nerve pathways, your brain, your liver, your gallbladder, your pancreas, stomach, intestines, kidneys, all benefit from essential fatty acids, as does your respiratory function and your ability to use oxygen and absorb it to the cells deep in your body and in your periphery limbs, of course. And also connected with the health of cell division and all normal growth processes. The other thing is that one thing you might have come across people who've said to you, actually, do you know, I can't sit in the sun because it makes me feel really unwell. And there is a reason for that, that if you are low in essential fatty acids, one of the things that happens is that when you're in the warmth and light of the sun, it stimulates secretions from certain of your organs. And if you've no essential fats in the membrane to help that secretion take place, which is another role of essential fats, particularly with the goblet cells in the body, which are in all of our mucosal pathways, like our gut, for example, and our lungs. Those organs dry out under the effects of the sun because they can't secrete correctly in the sun's light. And that means that, you know, it's much more difficult for someone then to sit out in the sunlight and actually get the benefit of it. So we've already mentioned about them being a resonance system for solar energy. And of course, back in the 1930s and past, heliotherapy, light therapy, used to be a system for supporting people with things like tuberculosis, colitis, gout, anemia, arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, etc., to help them recover from those conditions. And they know from studies that sun exposure can lower blood pressure. So unfortunately, as penicillin and antibiotics became available, sunlight therapy was sort of pushed to one side, really. But a lady was telling me the other day when I was speaking to someone, she was saying that I think she was unwell with back health. This is a lady, I've given this talk last week as well. A lady was in hospital with back problems, and she said that on sunny days, because she was in hospital for months, the nursing staff would open the big doors in the wards and wheel them out into the sunlight to get a bit of light and fresh air. And so, you know, it took some time, but unfortunately now the message is, oh no, cover yourself up from the, well, plaster yourself in cream from the sun, because it's not, you know, and obviously if we're silly about it, it can burn the skin, and that's not a good thing. But to get 20 to 30 minutes of light on the skin every day, if possible, is a really good idea. And so light and the endocrine system. So one of the other magical things about light, and there's a lovely book by, now, is it Jacob Lieberman? I can't remember his name, wonderful researcher anyway. He's done a lot of research on eye health and also light and its effects on the health of the body. And light enters your eye when you're out in it, which is why every morning when I go out for a walk, I don't put my lenses in, I don't put my specs on, I just let the natural light come into my eye for 20-30 minutes, because that signal travels to the hypothalamus, which in turn stimulates pituitary function and the rest of your endocrine system from that master gland. So really, really helpful, not only for vitamin D, but also for glandular function. Now, solar flares. This is very interesting. Probably might feel contentious for you know, if you've not come across it before. So I apologise if that's the case, but it's very interesting, and it's what I've come across in my researches. So solar flares, which we've had quite a number of this year because they are more intense about every 9 to 14 years, they're a brief eruption of, as it says, intense high energy radiation from the sun's surface associated with sunspots on the sun, and they actually contribute to radio and magnetic disturbances on Earth. Now, prior to 1889, which is when the Earth started to be electrified, and particularly between 1889 and 1894, they know from recorded information that influenza bouts occurred in time every 9 to 14 years with huge bursts of solar radiation. And what I have seen is that solar radiation causes damage to the nervous system, and the influenza is the acute illness that occurs as your cells repair all of those nerve cells, which of course, once you get a load of dead cells coming into the body's routes of elimination, needing clearing, that's why you get these intense symptoms like aching all over, big respiratory symptoms, etc., because your body is trying to clear those cellular wastes. Now, from 1645 to 1715, and not just then, at other points in history, that one was called the Maunder minimum. The other ones also have names. There was no sunspots and no recorded influenza. Now, 1889 to 1894, there was widespread electrification going on around the Earth, and these poor people, they weren't just putting up with it buried in the ground or in pylons going across the fields. They actually had wires hanging over the houses, and that was the way the system was passed through the housing network that there was at the time. And from 1889 to 1894, there was widespread influenza. And it's interesting that there was an enormous bout at the end of the 1914 to 18 war, when they brought in radio technology. In 1957, they brought in radar technology, and there was another enormous bout, because after 1894, rather than being every 9 to 14 years, influenza was recorded on an annual basis, most often autumn, winter, and early spring. 1968, they started to put satellites up for TV, and again, another huge outbreak of very unpleasant flu. And what's interesting is to see, and again, if you want to explore this further, there's a fascinating book written by Dr. Arthur Furstenberg called, I think it's The Rainbow of Life. And he goes into all of this. In 1995, if you interview a lot of medical staff at the time, which he did, they brought in mobile phone technology, and obviously a lot of antennas started to go up around the Earth. Now, this is all of these things that they've brought in are a form or another, on one wavelength or another, of electromagnetic frequencies. such as we would receive with sunspots from the sun, but of a different, much more concentrated, close kind because it's here. And like him, I find a lot of my concerns fall on deaf ears with friends and family because we are contributing to our own poor health ongoing, I feel. And in 1995, what nursing staff and medical staff observed is that when people got influenza, they didn't always recover from it properly. And this is where your ME, your chronic fatigue syndrome, your post-viral syndrome has been occurring ever since. Long COVID would be another example. So if we look at the moon's journey, from the new to the full moon, and from the full to the new, we've got 29 and a half days. And the Earth also has around it another electrically charged field, but it's positive ions that are in the ionosphere with a load of sort of positively charged particles and dust. And the ionosphere stretches roughly 50 to 400 miles out from the Earth's surface and then touches right at the edge of the magnetosphere, which is the Earth's own magnetic field. And if we look at the full moon, and often it's easier if I can draw this on a flip chart because you can actually kind of see it in motion a bit. But if you've got, if you picture the full moon, at the full moon, the moon is on the opposite side of the Earth to the sun. And then you've got the ionosphere around it. Now, the full moon is pulled towards the sun by its gravitational field, and it squeezes the ionosphere in closer to the Earth. So if you can just picture in your mind, at that moment of the full moon, more positive ions come into the Earth's atmosphere, and therefore we breathe them in. So just hold that in your mind for a moment. And then at the new moon on the same side of the Earth as the sun. And as it's pulled towards the sun, it pulls away from the Earth, and the ionosphere is able to expand out a little bit. It's like a sort of breathing in and breathing out at the new moon. And you get then more negative ions in the Earth's atmosphere because there's that positive ion effect, ionization effect is drawing away. And so what I'd like you to picture is that your blood is negatively charged. Your blood vessels are also negatively charged. And this is the significance of why electromagnetic frequencies are so challenging for us, which is that we are also, like the song says, a body electric. You know, everything in our body operates with the minerals, which are charged with tiny electrical charges. So the movement of your muscles relaxing and tensing, including the heart, of course, which never stops relaxing and tensing, is all about the polarity. The rhythm of the heart is about the polarity. And so the blood and blood vessels negatively charged allows for an easy flow of blood through the veins and the arteries. So what happens when there's more positive ions or more negative ions in the Earth's atmosphere? Well, when the blood's more positively charged because of what we're breathing in, along with the oxygen, the blood cells clump together, and the blood literally becomes more thick and sticky. And you've probably heard that that is not a very helpful scenario. And it is often why people will feel, you know, particularly if their blood is already thick and sticky, they will feel perhaps that their arthritis, because it tends to aggravate, in my observation, chronic conditions. So their arthritic pain might be more intense, They might feel more headachy. They might feel very grumpy because, as the Chinese know, when the liver is congested and has more work to do and the blood is thicker and stickier, then the Chinese know that the emotion that manifests from the poor old liver is anger. And so then if we look at the new moon is much easier because there's more negative ions available. And so the blood is flowing very freely, but you might perhaps see more cleansing then, more acute illness starting, more colds, more flu, because it's much easier for the body to cleanse. The blood cells aren't clumping together, they're freely flowing. And as I say, this is just a little bit of physics. I am not a witch. And so, again, Roger Coghill, can't think of the title of his book, very interesting read on that one. And so then the moon is, sort of affecting whether there are more positive or negative ions in the atmosphere. And so we know that that can either have a positive or a negative effect. And of course, eclipses, because they're more closely aligned at that time, the sun, the moon, and the earth, they increase the effects of the new moons because the sun and the moon pull is stronger. The gravitational pull is stronger. And you'll have noticed, of course, for example, that at the spring equinox, the tides are much stronger because there's a bigger, the sun and the moon are very closely, well, they're equal day-night over the equator. And that alignment contributes to much stronger tides. And that also has an impact on the tides in the body. So as I was mentioning, the moon goes through a different sign of the zodiac every 2.5 days. And what Jonah Pornker has observed from Austrian lovely, observation over the centuries, which she has recorded and is passed down from her grandfather, from his grandfather, etc., is that each of those signs relates to a part of the body. And so the Aries rules the head, Taurus rules the throat and the neck, Gemini rules the lungs and the shoulders and the arms, the Cancer rules the chest, the liver, the gallbladder, Leo rules the heart, and Virgo the digestion, Libra kidneys, bladder, Scorpio reproductive, Sagittarius also has an impact on the liver as well as the thighs. Got a little story about that. Capricorn rules bones, knees and teeth, and Aquarius, your circulation, your ankles, your calves, and Pisces, very watery, rules your lymphatic system and your feet. And so if you have your sun sign in each of those, it's a really good idea. There's medical astrology, which is very, very interesting and bears out a work, it's worth a look. But Gemini, for example, are better not being smokers. If you are a Piscean, it's a really good idea to look after your feet. If you are Aries, try not to bang your head accidentally. There are all sorts of interesting observations I personally have made watching perhaps a full moon in a sign, new moon in a sign. So a new moon in Taurus, I've actually observed a lot of people have got in contact and said they've got a really sore throat. My sister rang me a few years ago and said, Chris has just come home. He feels really unwell and his thighs are aching. He's in so much pain with his thighs. So I suggested a little bit of hydrotherapy to help with the pain in his thighs. And she rang me later on that evening and she said, oh, well, he's come out in another bout of tonsillitis, which was his thing. He's a big, well, he's just literally given up sugar, has Chris, but loves lots and lots of sweet food and would be someone who regularly suffered from tonsillitis. But the fascinating thing about that is that Sagittarius rules the liver, which is always working hard when you're suffering an acute illness, and the thighs. And that was the symptom that he came home with that day. It was absolutely fascinating. The moon was in Sagittarius. So the other thing that is absolutely fascinating as well is that there is a great deal of health in the female cycle to be found if you can get the body into tune with the moon cycle. A lot less pain and a lot, the cycle just generally being a lot easier emotionally and physically. And so if you notice, turtles will always, for example, sea turtles will always come up on the beach naturally and lay their eggs with the full moon. And ideally, with women, if we can ovulate with the full moon and menstruate with the new moon and be as close as we can in line with this cycle, and there's various mineralization we can work with to help this, then it makes an enormous difference to the way that cycle feels. And I'm just trying to think of a book for you and I can't think of the title. I'm really sorry. So if you want to have a look at biodynamic gardening, if you want to have a look at what the moon's doing now, just out of interest, lovely website that has a super moon calendar on it, astro-seat.com. Really nice one to look up. So where does the word lunatic come from? Well, it does come from Luna, connected with the moon. And as I mentioned at the beginning, that full moon effect has been recorded over the years with increased violence, depression, mood swings, road rage, as it says, hyperactivity, migraines, asthma can worsen. Dare I say it, werewolves, not that I've seen any myself. The other fascinating things is that if we have really strong winds, because of them blowing about in the atmosphere, they also increase the amount of positive ions in the atmosphere. I think they have really strong winds each year in Siberia. And they've actually done research on and recorded the effects on health of this increase in positive ions in the atmosphere. Don't quote me on the country because I might be wrong, but I'm sure it was somewhere Russian. Do you know, it's absolutely fascinating the things that research gets done on, with the National Institutes of Health, with, if you can think of something, somebody somewhere on Earth will be researching it. It really is quite fascinating. So what are natural sources of negative ions that are really good to be near? And this is why, when our children were young, Jenny and I were really fortunate enough to go on group holidays in Scotland and be near mountains, near running water. And both of those things are wonderful sources of negative ions. So if you are walking by running water, if you're by the sea, if you're by waterfalls, if you're climbing in the mountains, or if you're walking in woods or forests, you are accessing all of that wonderful negative charge and re-ionizing yourself. And there's a lovely philosophy in Japanese health, or is it, no, Swedish health? No, perhaps it is Japanese. Sorry, Jen.
I was going to say both.
Oh, both. It could be both.
Certainly Japanese. Yeah.
Yes, about walking in the woods, and it's a thing that they acknowledge to do for health, which is absolutely lovely. So then what are our sources of positive ions? And of course, unfortunately, we're absolutely surrounded by them. Just the electrification of our house. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just turn it all off overnight? But of course, then we've got fridges and freezers and hoovers and TVs and mobile phones and air conditioning in the offices and goodness knows what. And um, you know, that imbalance, it's so good if you can to get outside every day for a walk, get outside in your garden, just try and change up the amount of positive ions that you're collecting around yourself. Maybe even get your feet on the earth, because also they do know that if you can get your feet onto the earth bare, you will recharge those negative ions just sitting in your garden eating your lunch or something. So then waxing moons, which is from our new moon to our full moon, they found to be better for absorbing nutrients, so you can more easily remedy any deficiencies at that time of the month. And the closer you get to the full moon, the more effective that uptake is. At a waning moon, which is going in the other direction, so you're moving from the full moon to the new moon. At the moment, we're moving from the new to the full. And so we're right slap bang in the middle yesterday on the 12th of August, because it's the 19th of August coming up is our next full moon, which will be in Aquarius. Now, it's also worth knowing that if you want to know roughly where you are in your moon phases, at every new moon, the new moon will be in exactly the same sign as the sun. So, of course, on the 5th of, now was it the 4th or the 5th? 4th or 5th of August, it was in Leo, and this full moon will be in the opposite sign, which will be Aquarius. So, full to new moons, this is why I always run detox retreats on a full to new moon. They are better for releasing, for flushing out and detoxifying wastes from the body, for supporting the liver in that process. And that detoxing gets stronger the closer you get to a new moon. Now, I've mentioned the equinoxes and the solstices, and of course, we have acupuncture meridians, and the observation with our meridians is that there is a movement during the winter. The energy is moving up the back and down the front, and there's almost a shutdown, whereas in the summer, moving up the back and down the front. And of course, at each equinox, that energy flip is what contributes to a detox from the cells, which is why it's so good to be nicely hydrated, to have a nice hydrated diet, so that, lots of fruit and veg there, so that you are supporting that detox from the cells. And if that clear out is managed well, that acute, it might be gastric, it might be a cold, it might be a flu, then you move into a higher state of vitality. And so it's around the equinoxes and beyond, around the solstice, the winter solstice particularly, you can see some acute sort of symptoms manifest. And so why eat with the seasons? And one of the reasons is you are much more likely to be able to buy that food local if you're eating with the seasons. And when Joanna Bewtiched talks about resonance, that vegetable is grown in the same vibrational environment as you are. Whereas if you eat lots of bananas from the tropics, that fruit is grown with an entirely different vibration, climate, and resonance. And that's why a banana actually in the winter, like a mango, for example, can be extremely difficult to digest. And so it's really great to eat, with the season that is growing locally, if you can. Because it not only gives you plenty of variety in your diet, it also is better for the environment. It's how we evolved. It saves money because it hasn't flown hundreds of miles. And if you spend money locally, you keep it local. So, of course, here we're really lucky because certainly in the autumn and spring and winter and spring, we have lovely, at the moment, because he hasn't retired, in his 70s, we're so lucky he hasn't retired. I know, Linda, you go to him as well, don't you? And you're all the way from Huddersfield. Grows us some beautiful organic local veg. And so with seasonal eating in the spring and summer, what you'll notice is that a lot of food grows above the earth, except for sort of things like your radishes and your spring onions and your lovely new potatoes and things. Of course, there's always exceptions, but we get lots of lovely leaf crops. We get our lovely green beans, our broad beans, and tomatoes and so on, aubergines, cucumbers, and they are all things that are flourishing above the earth. And if you can, it's good to get some raw in. Whereas in autumn and winter, there's a lot more root veggies available. And of course, squashes come in the autumn as well and give us all those beautiful colours. But if you can, to stick to more cooked, more warm food, even if it's only lightly cooked, it's better for it to be slightly warm and always have a hit of raw for the enzymes. You can always put a little green salad with a lovely big bowl of warm soup, because undoubtedly raw food is a fantastic source of enzymes, but on the other hand, to eat a lot of raw in autumn and winter is very hard on the spleen. And so it's much better to have it lightly cooked and warmed. So I'm not going to go into food a lot today because we've sort of looked at a different perspective of natural influences. But if you think about fruit and vegetables particularly, they're like light energy in solid form. And all of those colours that are on the light spectrum, all of those phytochemicals, we still don't know the benefits of them, but they are all enormous. Just the ones they have discovered are absolutely vast in their array of support. And so the food's colour is revealing some of its nutrient content. And colour is not just an aesthetic, there is a vibrational message there as well. And what is sort of believed in things like the Indian tradition, where they acknowledge the chakras, which of course are over a nerve plexus in the body, is that each of those foods nourishes a corresponding chakra with the colour and the nerves and the organs and the glands associated with it. So it's really good to get a rainbow of colour in your diet if you can. Howdy, any questions?
Thank you, Suzy.
Thanks, Jen.
Just want to say, do you say something about me going to Johnny's in Aqua Vegetables?
Oh, yes.
I mean, I actually don't anymore because I'm sort of far away, but I've found a community garden near me that grows their own things. It's all volunteers. So I go on a Wednesday and they just grow lots of lovely, local homegrown products in season. It's really good.
Yes, you've got somewhere near, that's good.
Yeah, and another lady grows her own, she stands at the end of the lane and sells her veg and things. So yeah, I was listening to something the other day about permaculture, how, you know, people are growing their own more because of the state of the supermarkets and shortage of food and things like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah. It's not easy growing situation this year because it's been so damp.
Yeah, it has, yeah.
But
And then bone dry.
and that, yes, combinations of from damp to dry. But I've had a lovely crop of broad beans. But the tomatoes are only just starting to set, except for one plant which has some ginormous tomatoes.
They're saying about the benefits of broad beans, that we underestimate them.
Oh, right. Yes.
I think it was in the newspaper or maybe on the radio. Might have been the food program. Yeah.
Because they're lovely raw or lightly cooked, aren't they?
Mm.
Yes, nice source of protein. Hello. Hi, Jen.
Yep, sorry, I had to had Fred just come in and had to give him some information before he yeah. Anyway, so apologies for dipping out and coming back in. I've put a link in the chat to a website that people might be interested in. It's
Oh, yes,
produced,
lovely.
it's written by a chap who lives in Strontium up near Lunatic, and yeah, you can sign up for his emails and stuff comes through at intervals. It's really quite interesting.
Yes, that looks lovely. Have you been there, Jen?
Yes. So he and his partner live on a croft on the outskirts of Strontium, and I must have come across his books in the information centre there, and I'm just looking to see if I lay my hand on them. No. Yeah, and then signed up to his newsletters, and as a result of that, heard about some walks that he was organising up near Fort William, which happened to coincide with when we were up there one week. So myself and Natasha, daughter-in-law, joined him. There were about 4 of us wandering through this woodland in a very mindful forest bathing sort of way. And what I noticed was how difficult it was for me to walk slowly. So I'm naturally quite a fast-paced walker, and forget all the other stuff that we're supposed to be noticing, you know, smelling, feeling, all the rest of it. I really struggled to walk slowly, and I'd cottoned onto it by the end of this sort of couple of hours or whatever it was. But yeah, that was really quite an interesting lesson for me. And then by coincidence, I spent an afternoon with his partner because I got in touch with a local cafe and craft centre to see if they were running any spinning workshops whilst I was up there. And the woman wasn't, because she was going off to the Shetland Wool Festival that week. But she put me in touch with one of her neighbours who did do such things. And it happened to be his partner on his croft. So yeah, so it was interesting.
It was a coincidence. Yeah.
I guess up there, smaller world than down here.
Yes, yeah. I must admit, having been to the beach while we were away, I'd forgotten how good, and you know, just a few hours at the beach can make you feel. Just the, you know, being in the water and having your feet on the sand in the warmth, and it just is transforming. You know, you walk off the beach and you feel completely different than when you walked on it.
It's like expansiveness as well, isn't it?
Yes, there's that as well, I'm sure. Yes, yeah. Yeah.
That was really interesting. Thank you, Suzy.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Can you just tell us the website again for the moon cycles? I missed that, Suzy. Could you?
Yes, it's astro-seek.com.
Astro dash what? Sorry.
SEEK.
Astro dash seek. Yes, that's lovely. Thank you. Thank you. I'll look that up.
Yes, it's a lovely free resource, actually. Very good.
Oh yes, I found it. Found it. Yeah. Thank you. Got that. Thank you. Thanks so much. I'm going to have to Zoom, so I need to go and start my
Yes.
Take care.
Have fun. Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Bye.
coming.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Nice to see you, Jenny.
So, any more questions or thoughts, or no? Well, thank you very much for coming today. I honestly did wonder if there would be anybody able to come. So, and there is
How many of the wellbeing talks are on Zoom, Suzy?
it's every other month.
Right.
So June was the last one, and this September one, if you're down, Jen, is face to face at the Kite, and we're having a lady doing shamanic drumming, which should be very interesting.
What's the date of that, Suzy?
Meditation. Oh, it's late, isn't it, Joe? Is it 17? 17.
Yeah, 17.
Very good.
Sorry, 17th of September.
Yes.
That's it. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it's only £3, so.
That was great.
Yeah,
Thank you very
just
much.
helps to pay the cost of the room. Thank you very
Nice
much.
to meet you and to
Yep.
see you again. All the best. Bye.
Look after you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Suzy. Bye.
See you,
Bye.
Joe. Bye. Bye, Jen. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Catherine. Bye, Jen.
Bye. Bye.